And we're live. Good evening, ladies, and good evening, who's ever joining us on YouTube Live on our colorful YouTube. This is our second chat. Last time that we met, we were talking about self-care, and we talked about a lot of different areas. But before we get started, I just wanted to go around and everybody introduce themselves. I'll start. My name is Dr. Valencia Wiggins, and I'm a psychologist here in Chicago and also an educator. I'll go to my left to Pam Larkin.
Hey, so I'm Pam Larkin. I am a therapist and work at a group practice called Optimum Joy Clinical Counseling. I've been there for about a year and a half now. And then before that, did community mental about 8 years.
Okay, thank you. I'll go around for Rosalyn Bates.
Hi, everyone. I'm Roslyn Bates. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor, also a seminarian graduate with an MDiv. I have been in the field for about 15 years now as a counselor. Glad to be here. I work as an assessment specialist at Amida Health.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Jennifer Ngaonye.
My name is Jennifer Ngaonye. I am a licensed professional counselor at a clinic called Family First Counseling Clinic. I have been doing that for about a year now. I think I'm one of the newbies of the group, and just excited to be here.
And Roslyn Jordan up to the right of the screen.
Yes, hello, I'm Rosalyn Jordan, and I'm also a licensed professional counselor, and I work at Optimum Joy Clinical Counseling, also here in Chicago, and I probably would say I'm the other newbie here, but happy to be joined by these wonderful women and talking about self-care tonight. So,
Good. I didn't mention where I also work. I work at a place called Meyer Clinics. So I've been there a long time. That's where I practice as well. Mm-hmm. So let's start off. So this is our self-care part 2, and we called it Reloaded. So we had some questions that came up from last time that we met, but let's just do a check-in and just see how we're doing here on day 1,000 of being sheltered in place. How we getting through? How we getting through, love? Let's hear how you feeling.
Yeah. Well, today is a really beautiful day here in Chicago, so that has definitely helped a lot. I am pretty faithful about shelter in place. I was able to get out today and enjoy a little bit of the sunshine, so I'm a little encouraged by the warm weather, yeah. I would say that I'm in a pretty even kill mood today. It's been some weary times though since we've been inside. So, but today's a good day. Mm-hmm.
How about you, Jennifer?
I think I would concur with Rosalyn. I think the nicety of the day, I know that's not a word, but it being so nice outside kind of helps with mood, kind of getting out and getting some of that good vitamin D helps. Can't lie, this week was a little bit rough for me. I think I'm about over it all. Like, okay, I think I've had my feel, but like Roslyn said, like today is a good day, and I think sometimes we just have to lean into the present sometimes and just be like, okay, today's a good day. Although the rest of this week may not have been, today is a pretty good day.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Roslyn?
It's been an interesting week. I had a little break in my rhythm, little time off from some things I needed to take care of for the car. So I got some time this weekend. I'm gonna lean into and rest up, recharge, have a little bit of fun, me time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm in a good place today.
Sounds good. What's up with you, Pam?
Yeah, I do feel really tired today, but I did get to go on vacation for a week, which vacation was staying at home, working on my puzzles, working out with my nieces. We had them over this past weekend for Mother's Day. So just found some joy in some things that usually bring me joy. And then this week I just am back into the full swing of work. And so trying to balance that and kind of life with family. But I'm good overall.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I'm like you all. I'm feeling a little bit weary at the end of the week. I just finished a semester, and so just finishing up with that, and a little bit tired. But today was really nice. I enjoyed the sunshine a little bit, so I'm ready to do some traveling. Even though I don't think I'm going anywhere, but I'd like to do a little bit of traveling with you. So, last time that we talked, like we started talking about self-care in a lot of different areas. But from our last session, we had a couple questions that came up. And one of the first ones came from a person that was an adolescent, and they talked about, I'm bored. And I'm sure as we're going further into this is more the tough time for creativity, and boredom would arise. So what do you think would be the best approach? Talking to someone, say maybe a parent who has an adolescent, or if you know other adolescents, people out there, might be a teacher, but what would you say, what's the best approach for dealing with this?
For me, because I have an adolescent currently at home and who I often hear this from, it's very interesting. One thing that I have found to be helpful, at least for on the children's side or on the adolescent side, is to really acknowledge their feelings in the moment, right? Because sometimes as adults, we can overlook their feelings, or like, you're bored, you have tons of things to do, right? That's the very mommy response, at least it's my mommy response. And so what I found is that actually validating their experience of the fact that they have loss of normal community, loss of normal contact with their friends, loss of this sense of what their lives used to be. And so, which can seem after the fourth week or after the second month where we are, can seem like, oh my goodness, I'm at a loss of what to do. So one thing is absolutely validating their feelings and saying, okay, great, I get it, and relating to them. And talking with my son, motivation has been a big piece of our existence. And I can't lie, I have been not motivated as well at times. The fourth week or after the second month and so I just really lean into that for him, and to really acknowledge that, like, I know you're bored, I can be bored at times too, but even saying, well, what can we do together? What can we do to be creative and help you to be unstuck? And even unveiling some options that they may not have thought of. Because I'm sure that there are some things that even though being in the house for 2 months, I'm like, oh, I'm bored. I can't think I've cleaned all I can clean. I've done all of this, but I'm sure that there is something, if we just sat and thought long enough, that there's something that we can tap into. There's another resource that we can tap into to be able to help navigate the boredom or the staleness of the time that we have. So those two things I think are important. Is to really validate how you feel, like, I get it, but also to say, okay, so let's really stop and think about, what are my choices? Because you always have a choice.
One of the things that I was listening at this week, I went to a seminar about creative interventions on telehealth this week. And one of the ideas was, certainly doing things together, but what about those kids who can't identify their feelings or don't know what's going on inside, or giving them ways to express the loss that they've experienced by not having their friends. And one of the ideas was to create a soundtrack for this period that they're in right now. They were able to go through, like if they, have music that they like, to create a soundtrack and then talk to them about what their soundtrack, is, to give them a way to kind of tap into why they chose what they chose. And it helps them to talk about what they're feeling or what they're going through. And another idea was to have a head, like an outline of a head, and have them do like a collage about what's all the stuff that's inside of their heads, create a collage as a way to talk about what they're experiencing or what they see or what they're feeling if they can't find the words for it. So those are some creative things to do, not just for them, but for us, right? Expressing how we feel in this time period. So I would agree with you, finding creative ways to do things together, but also help them to express what they're experiencing beyond just being bored. What more, creating conversation. So, yeah.
One other thing that I have valued during this time is celebration with my nieces. So whether it's birthdays or graduations, whatever the thing is, to really encourage your kids to think about those occasions and how can we celebrate those in really creative and fun ways. Whether that's a parade, which I've accidentally got trapped behind one time, or it's making a sign that you show during a Zoom call, or making cake pops for someone's birthday. I think that celebration is still really, really important during this time. So,
Yeah.
Yes, I was thinking too, for families, for parents, whether you're a two-parent home or a single parent, or maybe an Alice is living with a grandparent, this is the time that is forcing you to actually be more creative. Like you're talking about being creative with your children and your child, and helping them be creative. And I think I work with a couple of adolescents, and we talk a lot, and they talk a lot about being bored. But having that further conversation where, what are the things that you do like? We know we've got the social media and things like that, but I've had opportunity just to tap into, well, you know what, I like plays. Okay, let's see what other things that we can find that we can watch, getting prepared, reading. I know that's a tough one with adolescents, but it's interesting what it's doing for families during this time. Even Jennifer, as you were just talking, what you found.
Absolutely. And what it does is it helps them to uncover characteristics about themselves that they may not have necessarily ever paid attention to. Right. So it forces them to look beyond just the surface feeling of, oh, I'm bored, to say, well, let's talk about, or let's think about, what else are you really feeling? Okay, being bored is just one level of that, but what else are you really feeling? And what else do you get to tap into that you get to learn about yourself? I know a big thing for parents has been stepping into this role of being teacher and being all of these other things on top of being mom, right? So now I'm or being dad, right? Now I'm tapped into being stepping into this other role that a lot of us don't have any clue about being, right? And so even for us as parents, it's helping us to be able to tap into things, into characteristics, and learn more about ourselves that we may not ever been able to uncover had we not had this time.
Yeah, that's good.
I wonder too, even learning more about your school, your children's education, what they're learning in school, and how they're learning. Now you see that 24/7 now, but
and even how it's different from the way you learned it. And
right.
Yeah. And so in those moments, I say grace is a big component of this time. And even in those roles as you step into, I think for parents, we oftentimes miss the point, but it's giving ourselves grace to know that we won't get it all right, giving ourselves grace that we're not the teacher, and say that we're doing the best job that you can do. And I think that is enough, and letting ourselves off the hook a bit.
Mhm.
Say, you're doing the best job that you can do. You didn't go to school all those years to learn how to do what teachers do. But it is saying that as a parent, I am a teacher. You're your child's first teacher. So although I may not know all the ways to do algebra, or I may not know how to help my child understand certain reading or writing fundamentals, there's still things I can teach my children that as their first teacher, that never goes away as a parent. And so I think that when we give ourselves grace to do those things and lean into that, then the pressure can be lifted a bit.
Mhm.
Amen.
Yeah. So just another question that came up just had to do with what about, especially during this time of quarantine, for those that are single, married, for widows, for elderly, how do they cope, or what coping skills can we provide for dealing with the shelter in place, even as for some people as we're coming near the end, but what would you say to some of that, or some of those categories? I know one thing I'm thinking about for the elderly, depending on where they live, if they live, a lot may live by themselves. Some may be in nursing homes or assisted living, but a lot, of course, will be a concern about their health. Maybe some fears about getting the COVID or things like that, but also the importance of community or lack of community. I automatically think of elderly, think, oh, they're by themselves, but that might not necessarily be the case. I could think of some who live in a neighborhood and they have neighbors who are checking on them. But I do think about those that are in assisted living, and what's that community like for them?
There were a lot of concerns about COVID-19, the spread of that in nursing home communities, and here in Chicago, that's been in the news a lot, and people are really wrestling with that reality of how do I connect with someone who is in a community of that nature. And there are mental health issues at play, like Alzheimer's, dementia, that seem to press into the isolation, the sense of isolation that they already feel. And so it's key for us to take a look at that and see how we can be helpful. I've heard that some people are training the elderly on some technological tips so that they have some kind of voice, and that they can figure out how to connect and stay vocal and communicative in the best way that they know how with their families. So I thought that was interesting, and that certainly is one way that we can empower the elderly and those who are otherwise isolated for medical reasons.
I like that about empowering the elderly.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I think on the other side of that too, for caretakers, can be something as simple as empowering the caretaker to realize that although this time can be frustrating and it can seem hopeless, right? It can seem like there's nothing that I can do, but to realize that there's always a choice and that there's always something like that you can do, and that just the power of choice in that. And when I look at the power of choice and not look at the power and not look at the powerless of that, the hopelessness tells me about, then I can look for options, and I can look for other things to help empower elderly, or even to help empower myself. So maybe it is pushing for phone calls. Maybe it is making sure I can't go in, but I saw a lot of people stand outside of their loved ones' windows to show, to let them know that they're there and that they're loved. And doing things like that helps you to be able to say, okay, kind of to take that power back, that hopelessness takes away.
Yeah. One of the things that we're doing in our building, because I live in a condo building, and so is, we've signed up for the elderly who need things. If they need someone to run out and get something, so we have a list in our laundromat downstairs. And so if there's a need, there's a list of people that they can call upon to help them out in that way. So, just trying every little angle that we can to be supportive of each other and the elderly that are in our building. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's really great. I do that. What about for those that are single?
She laughed.
Well, that would be me.
There's 3 of us over here.
Three of us over here.
Let's raise our hands.
Yeah. So I know for myself that I am working as hard as I was before this all started.
Yes.
So
Yes.
then, engaging in good self-care, I've just tried to be intentional about the space that I work in, not working all over the place, but I have a set space that I work in. When I close the door, I'm done, and just trying to identify, key transition points in my space so that I know what I'm doing when I'm here, what I'm doing when I'm there. So it also helps me to do that mental switch as well. And if I'm, everybody's Zooming or hanging out or any one of those technological platforms these days. And so I have also tried to just call people sometimes. Like, I never thought that, it would get a little bit weary, like looking at people all the time. I appreciate that, but to use a variety of technology. So, text, if I'm going to use technology, text sometimes and Zoom sometimes, and just a phone call as opposed to constant one way or the other kind of add some complexity to that. And then just having good self-care and taking advantage of the moment. I've gotten more sleep. I have worked out more. I've, did some foundational planning in terms of how I eat, making this time a time to create change in your life that if you were running, otherwise you would not be able to create. So I'm trying to be mindful about how I use my time and make sure that it's adding good value to my life while I'm resting. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, because I've had to work at just making sure, when do I start my day? I started at 9 o'clock, I ended at 5 o'clock. That's when I shut down the computer, the Zoom meetings are over, classes are over, walking. For me, using this time to really cook, work on eating more healthy, and cooking, eating out way less.
More money.
Finances are much better these 2 months.
Yeah.
But also about you have to be intentional about connecting too. So what was interesting, probably the beginning of the shelter in place, I probably wasn't trying to contact people, but then realizing, you can go for a walk, you can do a social distance walk. So I've had friends where we've met in the park walking social distance, but that brought some energy, Then the first time I did that, I was like, I hadn't seen anybody for a month. But so now doing that more, So
yeah, I too, as a single, I'm still working. Part of my other hat to wear is as a staff pastor, and even though the work of ministry continues, the way that we are doing ministry is changing.
Mm.
And so I'm working a little more from home. And prior to the shelter in place, I had learned what I could reasonably do from home, as opposed to what I needed to do absolutely in the office. So it's affected me in the sense that I'm learning how to manage my time in a new way. And I still it still feels like I'm expending energy. It's just in a different way, but I am getting more rest, thankfully. Kind of clearing my head and learning some new things, technologically speaking, turning inward, which I do need to do a lot because there's so much output for me between my work at the church and also in the clinical world. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
But there's always things to learn, always new ways to grow, things to sharpen, ways to prioritize. So that's what this time is teaching me.
Mm.
I've actually connected with a couple clients who also live on their own, and they often, or they've been more regularly talking about their relationships and kind of looking at their patterns of connecting with people and reevaluating who are the people that I want to keep in my life. And if I choose to have them in my life, are there certain needs that I need to express to get more of in this relationship? And so I found a lot of people reflecting on that, of giving therapy a try because they have this extra space, this extra window. And so it's not just around relationships, but they're talking about their faith, they're talking about their family. And so, yeah, people are just using this space to look inward and grow. So that's been really encouraging.
Mm. I was wondering, Pam, if you have clients who are very involved in church and now with the space away, they're kind of like, we keep, like Rosalyn just talking about resting. I know for me, just some time has freed up. I'm very involved in my church, but just to have actually some rest for a little bit. And if you've noticed that, especially those who work in the church.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the leadership team at church, and I would say one of the things that we noticed right away is that our volunteers got a break, right? And how pleased I was for them. You know, I think that for folks who maybe aren't working, and so this space actually feels like too much, I think that's a different conversation. But I think for folks who have been just pushing, going, this is really a welcome to reflect on their own heart and their own relationship with Jesus. And I think to trust, I think even as a leader, that even if I don't connect with my congregants in the same way, to trust that God is still present and still working in their lives. Yeah, I think that is a good thing for leaders to learn as well. So, yeah.
That too is a balancing act as a leader, helping people understand that they can still access the presence of God apart from the community. I mean, there's something very unique about a corporate gathering, but the Spirit of the Lord is still just as accessible in solitude as in community. So I think that is a huge spiritual learning curve for people in our times.
I think sometimes we're so given to doing. This is a time of learning how to be.
Right.
Be, yeah. So, because that's our culture too, right? So not only is it our church, but it's our culture, you know, that we are an achievement doing, performing culture, you know? So yes, learning how to be, you know, is a huge lesson. I think that if we are willing, we can learn in this season.
What about just transition a little bit for our people that are married? What's happening The shelter in place.
Jennifer, I saw that look on your face.
I know. I thought in my head, is it just Jennifer and me? Okay.
Yeah, come on and help. Come on and help.
In talking with a couple that I counseled today, I interestingly enough, really, I asked them the question, what has this time really taught you about each other and about yourselves? And they were like, wow, I never really thought about that. And I think that this time can be several things for depending on where you are as a couple. I think for me, it's been a time of slowing down and reconnecting, right? That because my husband and I both are kind of really on the go. And so that's the time of slowing down and looking at each other like, hey, like, hey, how you doing? Right. But I think even as for married couples, I think and it might be similar for singles, it's still that inward exploration of how have we shifted and changed individually? And let's do a reassessment and saying, okay, so how are we shifted and changed individually? And how has that impacted our relationship? And how do we want to moving forward beyond this experience, right? So for my husband, it's kind of been like dual. So it's been, my husband and I, it's been this inward look at ourselves to say, okay, where are we individually? And then looking at each other and saying, okay, so where are we as a married couple? And where are we as we relate to one another, and what do we need to fine tune and what do we need to fix? And how can we be better once leaving this space, or how can we, or what is this time really meant for us to cultivate in our marriage that we need to for the next, to move forward. So it's been quite interesting. Yeah.
Jennifer, you sound like you've been so intentional.
Listen. So there, I will say this, that at the beginning, we were not intentional. It was more so because we have kids. It was more so, okay, how do we survive? Right? So how do I survive? But the longer that you stay in a place, the more you kind of just are like, okay, so I'm here for, like, we're here and we're here for a reason. And really looking at how we don't want to waste the time to say, okay, so if we're gonna do this, then like, okay, so maybe I need to look at us and say how we, how do we get along? So I would say we did not start off intentional at first. We grew into intentionality. How about that? At first it was just survival. How do we survive?
Yeah, that's usually how it works in practice. Survival first and then thrive.
Yeah. Sure. And then grow.
I thought that'd be a good point, because it's not like you had time to prepare for this. Nobody saw this coming,
Yeah.
Tim and I don't have any kids yet, which right now I feel really grateful for, at least not to have little kids trying to do this. But I have actually, we've said often that we're so glad that we're quarantined together. And I think what I have been thinking about for the couples that I work with is just, are you with the person that you are so thankful that you are with right now? And are you the person that someone would want to be in quarantine with? Right?
That's good.
That's good. Well,
Think about it.
Right? Because I don't think that I am that wonderful all the time, but I have really appreciated from Tim just the different ways that he has tapped into my love language of acts of service, because he's on furlough for a little bit, like cooking meals for me and bringing me tea between sessions and things like that. And So I think that there is a unique opportunity for people to grow in their relationship during this time, because that's all we have is time. And I think that even if you are in a place of conflict that's not domestic violence, I think that this can be the space to really confront some of the reasons why you're in so much conflict. So
Mhm.
Yeah, that's good.
So just kind of transitioning, one of the things we talked about a little bit our last session, we talked about the woman at the well. So Rosalyn, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, what I was speaking to was the reality that this woman, after her conversation with Jesus, left her water pot beside the well. And I saw that, I took that to symbolize what we in this time, having had really key issues emerge in our lives as a result of this pandemic, what we also would leave behind coming out of this pandemic, whenever that would be. But I was thinking about the fact that she entered the conversation one way and she exited the conversation differently. She was transformed. There were key issues that she may have been grappling with that Jesus brought to light in conversation and caused her to reconsider. So the leaving of the water pot in some ways could symbolize what we would be releasing, or what we would be the new things to which we will be released. New understanding, new habits, new ways of connecting with people, realignment of priorities. Her life was shifted as a result of that encounter. And we also have that opportunity to reconsider things, to realign things, and to also be recharged and renewed, refreshed in the presence of the Lord as well.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me is the deeper reality. She went to the well for water, right? But she got the deeper reality, like the real need that she had is what he spoke to, And so even as I think about this time that I have, and it would be a great time to clean out all of my closets and to get rid of stuff. And maybe some people are using it for that, but I've opted to use this time for more foundational things for myself, like really looking at relationships, looking at my priorities, as you said, Valencia, about like eating out. Oh my gosh, I did my taxes somewhere and I was like, okay, I ate my money last year. And so I can clean a closet, COVID-19 or not. But this kind of time that we have right now to really be reflective and to really look at how am I living my life, and is it the life that God has called me to live, and what can shift in terms of my priorities. And, one of the things I think about is we only get, my belief, we only get one go at this. So I want to make sure that I'm using this time that is a time that I could not have ever seen coming, and that we may never get again, to do some foundational shifting, and so I can throw the stuff out later, I can go through the cupboards later, but right through here, this house is the one that we're working on. So, what am I leaving behind? I want to leave behind anything that keeps me from moving in my purpose or how God has created me to be. So that's what I'm spending my time focusing on.
I think a big part of that too, in thinking about what you're leaving behind, and even specifically for the woman at the well, she had to have a perspective change or a thought change, right? And so when I think about her, when I think about that, when you're talking about that, Roslyn, and the fact that she had to make a choice to leave the water pot behind, and that and that decision to accept Christ in that way, right? And to accept Jesus in that way. And so how that shifting of thought and what you leave behind is a lot of negative thinking that won't serve you as you walk into the purpose that you're called into, or walk into the purpose that God wants for you. And so when I really think about leaving behind things, I think one of the things that I've seen in clients, one of the things that I've seen in talking to friends and talking to others, is that negative thinking that oftentimes that we carry, that we carried because it served us some type of purpose along the way.
Yeah.
But it won't serve us to the life that we want to have when we think about living a life of purpose, or living life on purpose, or being better, right? And so I think it's really important to begin to start letting go of that and surrendering those negative thoughts, negative messages that we might have heard from others that we've picked up along the way, and surrendering those things over to God, and surrendering those things period, to pick up purpose, to pick up the truth of who we are, and to really begin to pick those things up and beginning to tell ourselves no longer the lies that our negative thinking has told us, but telling ourselves the truth of who God says that we are, and the truth of what the lives that we are destined to live. Yeah.
I think for people who struggle with certain habits that they wish that they didn't have, that this is a time where they can experience some freedom from it. I think it's very likely that because of this pandemic, we reverted to the things that we knew once comforted us. And now is the space to say, I don't have to turn to that anymore. So alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever it is, I can experience some freedom. And that may take some hard work, but I think that is freedom that God wants for a lot of people. So the chase for that.
I always say it's hard, but not impossible. So when my clients say that, man, that's a lot, that's a head, I agree, it's hard, but it's not impossible.
And it helps you work on things that you didn't even know that you needed help with, right? She went to the well, she didn't know that she needed a new reality about anything, right? And so we think about all of the things that we are not doing right now because of this pandemic. We don't have, all of the entertainment that we've had, and all of the sports that we had, and all these other things. What are people discovering, as a result of not having these things? Now, there are going to be those who are like, all they can think about is, I want that back. But some people are probably saying, wow, I didn't realize how much of my life that took up, So there has to be that whole element of discovery right now, going on. When you think about this time. So
Absolutely. I think it also speaks to capacity. I mean, what was she filling her time, her energy, and her life with? And all of that got reconsidered. Jesus was telling her, you have had 5 husbands. So, I mean, without getting too far into that, there's time and energy spent in what we fill our lives with. And he was challenging her to think about that. What is the meaning of that? What value does it add? Or what does it take away? And so there was some decision making that she needed to make around that whole conversation, not just the reality of the 5 husbands, but the other questions about worship and who he is, who Jesus is. How do you see Jesus? And are you willing to embrace new revelations, new understandings around what you have filled your life with?
So what would you all say? And just thinking about, we've talked a little bit about what are we leaving behind after this global crisis. There's somebody said something earlier about going into purpose, other things that we might be leaving behind.
Ooh, some bad habits.
Yes.
Yeah, some bad habits for sure.
Yeah, it'd be interesting as you talk about that. Just as you talk about bad habits, if someone was journaling, keeping a track of those things that we're leaving behind, so it could be a reminder, maybe say 6 months from now,
Yeah.
maybe 12 months from now.
Checkpoints.
Yeah, some checkpoints. Where was I?
Yeah.
May 15th.
You know what? I try to do that every day, actually, journal every day so I can look back. I mean, you know, even as I think about that, and somebody said it earlier, Jennifer, I think about perspective, you know, back in November, that was like a word that was constantly, you know, reverberating for me in my journal was, you know, honestly, 2 words was death and perspective. You know, and then I thought, oh my gosh, coming into 2020, like, shut up, for real. Like, this is just constantly the 2 words that were in my ear, because so many people around me were losing loved ones, not because of COVID-19, you know, and I spent a lot of time just journaling, like, God, what is this, you know? And so coming into 2020 and COVID-19, you know, I do feel like that was something that he had just been speaking. And so perspective is a huge piece. So journaling, you know, can be a really helpful avenue to, number one, self-care, you know, whatever you're feeling, you know, whatever you're experiencing. I share that with clients all the time. Not everybody's a journaler, but for those who do journal or write, you know, this is a good way to engage in self-care, you know, and then, like you're saying, looking forward to like 5 or 6 months down the road, and then to come back and look at this time period and see what was going on, what did we learn, what did we really leave behind when you look back. So just thinking about those habits and things that I want to leave behind. I've been journaling about those kinds of things. So how am I doing 6 months down the road when I look back? How am I doing with that? So yeah.
And I'm a visual type person, so I think about things that visually and kinesthetically can help with that process, right? So even when I think about leaving negative thinking or negative messaging, finally leaving that stuff behind, I think about, I'm a big vision board person for purpose. So then changing that to be a board of things I'm leaving behind and putting those negative messages and things on board and creating that. And whether it is saying I'm breaking the board, like, you know, you break the board, even if you leave it intact, to go back and look at all the things that you left behind, or even doing something symbolic where you break it or burn it or something like that, or putting those negative messages into a water pot, into a jar, and casting those things away to symbolize that that action that you're doing in your mind and in your body, and just kind of doing that as a casting of away, so that you can be very intentional about doing that as a symbol to help you to be able to say, wow. And even understanding the reality that those things, matter of fact, not might, but will try to creep their way back in.
Oh, yes.
And to say,
They
and
will.
they coming back, they're gonna come back for you. But to say, just as I casted them away, to have that victory to say, I've cast it away one time, I can cast it away again. And it doesn't have to have the same power over me.
Yeah.
So even in that, as you journal, as you know, and for people who might be visual, saying, okay, I can do those things to keep doing those things to help me to be able to be a reminder that I can always cast those.
Yeah.
For me, I'm leaving behind some fears. I am mindful that I had some fears about technology and exposure. I'm always talking to people about exposure and being in the public eye. And so this is one more platform in the public eye. And, yeah, the struggle is real. So I have overcome some fears just
Yeah.
in this space, in a chat room, going live. But it is a dream come true for me. This is a longing in my heart that I've had for years to do something on this level. And here it is in the middle of a global pandemic.
Really, yes.
Funny how God works.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting how God knows the yearnings in our hearts and knows how to cultivate and create the conditions to bring things about, to bring things to the forefront, or to manifest a promise. So I'm glad to leave it behind. It's scary. It's scary. I don't want to ignore the losses involved in the process of gaining something, because I was stuck in some ways. But God has a way of moving all of us forward. He knew what I needed in order to get unstuck. And I am open to that process. I've opened myself to new ways of doing things, new ways of connecting, new ways of sharing, and seeing what I have to offer and how that can be offered in a way that I never imagined. So I'm grateful.
Yeah, that's good.
I think I would share. So my husband and I have been in our fertility journey, and I think hearing that our fertility clinics weren't going to be open, obviously, that made the journey, the process even harder, I think. But I really feel like my response to this process in general of just getting really angry and feeling really disappointed, that I would like to grow in a different way of responding. And I feel like this space is challenging me or requiring me to think more about that. And so I don't know that the pandemic is totally that by the time all this is wrapped up, that I will be in a different space, but I do feel like that is something that God wants me to let go of and come to a different stage in kind of the grieving process with it. So that's for anyone who is going through that journey. I want you to know that you're in solidarity with someone else. So
Thanks for sharing that. I think for me, I'm leaving behind probably procrastination of dreams that I've had, and I've not taken the steps to do them. And now during this pandemic, I keep thinking about the blessing in the pandemic, because so many things I've seen just answered, some different opportunities, some things to work on, things that I'm passionate about, actually this being one, especially for Christian African-American women of color as mental health professionals, finding our voice. We have a voice. And so this has been one thing that's exciting, just the connections, how we're all connected is just exciting to see that happen. And then some other things, just some things that I wanted to do as far as writing and things like that. So finally doing those things and moving forward, you know, with those things. So just as we were getting ready to wind down, we did have one question that came up on our chat, our live chat. It's from Verna Cartledge. She asked, as mental health professionals, what suggestions or steps can you give a person who is struggling to be normal or sane?
Wow.
To be normal or sane?
Can you read the question again?
Sure. As mental health professionals, what suggestions or steps can you give a person who is struggling to be normal or sane? And normal / sane.
Well, what comes to mind as I hear the question is what the definition of normal or sane is currently. And as we talk about this pandemic, I hear the term all the time, the new normal. So it's kind of like, I guess that question kind of speaks to some of the things we've already talked about, like finding a rhythm that works. Some people are having to reorganize their space, reorganize their time. And it comes with the recognition that some things won't be exactly business as usual. There will be some changes, some alterations, if you would. But there are some things that we will be able to keep steady, but it's partially determined by the value that we place on those things. So it's a process of discovery, learning what we want to normalize. And that's part of the journey. We have to ask the question again, like, what do I want to be normal? What can I establish in my life through habits, through repetition, through reconnection, all of those things. So we're actually creating our new normal, if you would, because of what we are valuing or reprioritizing. Yes. Anybody want to chime in with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think when I've thought about kind of what is normal and what is a new normal, it's really thinking about and reflecting upon what did you consider normal before, right? What is that? What did you deem as normal? And are you looking to societal norms to define that for you? What are you looking at to define normal for you? And if those are things that you and in your reflection have now come to understand, well, maybe weren't the right things to look to as normal, and I did not like the life I was living before, then it's saying, okay, so I want my new normal to look a little differently, to say that I want to be less busy. So for example, when I look at what was life for me that was normal, it was on the go busy, not breathing, not thinking a lot of the times, or always thinking 5 steps ahead so that I can always stay, and negating the present sometimes. So when I think about what I want normal, or how do I stay sane, or how do I, get back to that, I want to be able to now live a life where I am present, but also that I can plan ahead for the things I need to, but that I can also be present, and I can appreciate what is happening right now in the moment, and sit with that and be okay with that, and not have to always be on the go. So I think that a step is really looking at what was my normal before, and did I like that? If I didn't, then okay, then what do I need to change and shift to be able to live the life that I want to live, or the life that I think that is destined for me to live.
Yeah. Great time to reassess your values. Like you're saying, what you're all saying, it's like, what are my values? What am I, how, like you're saying, Jennifer, how am I living? What am I looking to establish my values? What's my baseline? What am I looking to determine how to live my life, and how does what I'm doing, how does what I did line up with that, and how do I now shift, and so I think a lot of it has to do with what are my values. Great time to reassess, what are my values? What am I living life according to? What's guiding my life? It's a great time to consider that and make shifts around that. So like you were saying, Jennifer, if we're busy all the time, was work or this or that what I was using to guide my life, and does that need to shift? What other things do I want to add into my life, and how do I shift that? So I'm an operational definition kind of person. I need to know what in the world was normal for you. That is such a vague, thought of like normal, because normal isn't the same for everybody, And when people talk about getting back to normal, the question can also be perceived as, are you trying to get back to what's familiar? And is going back to what's familiar the best thing?
Yeah.
Might not be,
Yeah,
So it's really about wanting to be more familiar or comfortable, or is it, what is that going back to normal about? So if I had that person sitting in front of me as a client, I'd be asking a question like, so what does that mean? What does that look like? What are you really trying to go back to? Because if you dig a little bit more, maybe you wouldn't really be trying to go back to that, So, so it just really depends on what normal means.
Yeah.
Well, as we get ready to close, I want to talk about just a few resources for those that are listening. Rosalyn, you had provided some helpful tool resources that we can share.
Yes, one of my recent discoveries was an organization that focuses on community wellness for Black women here in Chicago, Sister Afia, and that she is a wellness icon here in Chicago. They've had community workshops that focus on talking about mental health, mental awareness. Lately, I saw some advertisements about one of their upcoming topics dealing with intergenerational healing. So you can look her up if you so choose. She's got some great programming going on here in the city of Chicago. So check her out.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else had any other resources or? Okay. If not, okay, good. Well, let's go around and just check out before we end. Just, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling fine. I'm in a good place. I'm glad we had this conversation.
Yeah.
I'm just glad to be a part, and it was great to talk with you guys about all these things.
I feel like I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
It's really good to connect and just to kind of talk about how we're all navigating this space and to share with others. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to do that. Yeah.
And I feel grateful. I feel relaxed. This is actually relaxing. Talking to all tonight. Believe it or not, once we got it live, now we're flowing. It's like, okay, levels coming down. So thank you. Thank you. Well, we are going to end. We will be back again for part 3. So watch for us on Colorful. And we all say good night.